This video is sponsored by Ground News.
In order for me to marry my wife, I need to know she exists, and I need to know she's interested in me, and I need to be able to pursue her, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
To marry your wife, you need to take a leap of faith.
Yeah, but you need to know she actually exists first, right? Tell him, Matt.
But I need to know she exists first.
Bingo, well said.
So that's what I'm saying with God's existence. If God does exist, surely I need some kind of reason to think this isn't just a story I'm telling myself.
Conscience.
What?
Conscience. Where does that pesky little thing come from?
Oh, of course, conscience. Yeah, that's how we know that our partner exists. Good game. Well played.
It's an illegal chess move.
Over the years, Jordan Peterson has had a lot of, let's say, controversial takes on atheism. He's claimed that we're all religious.
Religious is what you act out. It doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or not.
And that true atheists, like truer than true atheists, they're murderers.
What, in your view, would a genuine atheist be like?
He'd be like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment.
And this is just to scratch the surface. But somehow, his response to Matt Fradd of Pints with Aquinas may have topped it all. Believe me, what you've seen isn't the half of it. And talking of half, get this. The UK Conservatives recently lost half of their seats, marking one of the most disastrous local elections in history. But despite this, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called for a snap general election on July 4th.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
The intriguing question, then, is why? And here's just one of the ways that Ground News, a website and app that combines news across the world and political spectrum, helps me cut through the nonsense. They've analysed 351 news sources to provide me with succinct information and what each political side is reporting, if indeed they're reporting at all. Unsurprisingly, the bias distribution is heavily skewed to the left, and while all sides are accurately reporting the call for the election, it's each of their narratives as to why Sunak has called it that, in a third of cases, is factually compromised. And you can check this all out at ground.news/rationality. By using Ground News, I not only receive the key factual takeaways of breaking news in a heartbeat, but also insights into each news source's political bias, the credibility of their journalism, and the ownership of the outlet. In a deeply polarised world, this helps me stay up to date in a balanced and objective manner. Ground News is fantastic for breaking down echo chambers, helping you understand the news you read and don't read. If you want to be an informed citizen, I highly recommend checking out Ground News. Go to ground.news/rationality to see it for yourself, or simply scan the code on screen. Don't let media bias fool you. Get the full picture with Ground News. Thanks.
What do you think the best argument for atheism is?
I don't think there is a good argument for atheism. I think it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of the world. So it's just, it's what would you say? It's an illegal chess move.
This is quite a remarkable statement, right? I mean, suppose you asked me, what is the best argument for theism? And my response was, there are no good arguments for theism. They're all equally vacuous, as they're all equally wrong. Now, I'm not a theist, and so I obviously don't accept a whole load of theistic arguments. However, if someone asked me what are the best arguments for theism, I wouldn't dismiss the question, accusing them of all being equally baseless.
I don't think there is a good argument for atheism.
They can't be all equally baseless, in fact, for they have different premises. Instead, I would acknowledge that some arguments are more compelling than others, even if I ultimately don't find them convincing. So, to me, this makes Jordan's confident and dismissive response seem especially peculiar. It's as if he's not even willing to consider the idea that there could be varying degrees of persuasiveness among arguments for atheism. It's a major red flag.
I think it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of the world. It's, what would you say? It's an illegal chess move.
Before continuing, though, let's get to grips with what atheism is, and ponder a few good arguments in its favour. Atheism, in essence, is akin to the stance of being a non-reincarnationist. Just as it seems peculiar to formulate an argument against reincarnation, because it's essentially a matter of not being persuaded by the proposition, atheism operates on the same basis. Atheism is fundamentally about not being convinced of the existence of deities. We're not convinced by the arguments presented by theists. Hence, this lack of conviction doesn't necessitate a belief in something, but rather a default position of skepticism regarding claims for which there is perceived insufficient evidence. Now, don't get me wrong, some atheists, such as myself, are convinced of the proposition that there are no gods, just as I'm convinced that there is no reincarnation. But the pressing point is that atheism isn't typically a positive proposition. It's rather a state of finding theistic arguments unconvincing. You know, if you want more details on the definition of atheism, I have a video dedicated to this very topic, as it's a sticking point for many apologists.
It's an illegal chess move.
Anyhow, with that laid down, let's consider a few robust arguments that support atheism. Don't worry, we're gonna get to Jordan, but first and foremost, let's lay the groundwork. One of the most compelling arguments is the problem of evil. This argument questions how an all-powerful, all-loving God could permit the existence of evil and suffering in the world. The apparent contradiction between such a God's existence and widespread suffering is, in fact, a primary reason many theists lose their faith and turn to atheism. For instance, consider the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, which killed tens of thousands of people and caused immense suffering. Events like these make it difficult for many to reconcile the idea of a benevolent, all-powerful God with the reality of such catastrophic suffering. Notice, of course, that this argument only applies to a special type of theism, one which maintains an omnipotent, omnibenevolent God. But since that special type is the one that most theists believe in, it's treated as an argument for atheism. This is because, again, atheism is effectively a lack of belief in theistic claims. Another substantial argument concerns inconsistent revelations. Different religions claim ultimate truth, yet their doctrines often contradict each other. Each religion insists that its specific miracles and teachings are true and that disbelief will result in horrific consequences, such as eternal damnation. This multiplicity of conflicting claims makes it highly unlikely that a benevolent and omnipotent God would allow such confusion to prevail. If one religion were true, its truth should clearly distinguish it from others, but this is not what we observe. A further argument is that history consistently shows a pattern for replacing supernatural explanations with naturalistic ones. For example, diseases were once believed to be punishments from gods, but are now understood through germ theory and medicine. Similarly, natural phenomena like lightning and earthquakes were attributed to divine wrath, but are now explained by meteorology and geology. The complexity of life, once seen as a divine creation, is now understood, by most of us at least, as the product of evolution by natural selection. The stars, once thought to be a firmament, are now known to be other suns, potentially with their own planets and life. This continual shift from supernatural to natural explanations undermines the credibility of religious claims that rely on the supernatural, further reinforcing the atheistic position. Alright, that will do it for now. Let's get to Jordan already.
Okay. Well,
it's based on the wrong...
This might just show that I don't understand you, but we'll get to it if I don't.
The best argument for atheism.
What's the best of the worst arguments?
Materialistic determinism is the best argument for atheism.
Really? Jordan thinks that materialistic determinism is the best argument for atheism. Let's unpack this. Materialistic determinism combines two views: materialism, which posits that everything is composed of material substances, and determinism, which holds that all events are determined by prior causes. Together, we get the view that everything is determined by material causes. Now, you might be wondering how a lack of belief in God, or even a belief that there are no gods, necessarily leads to the conclusion that the world is entirely materialistic and deterministic. Well, it doesn't.
But isn't that a philosophical sort of assumption or axiom?
That's a problem.
Yeah. Like for me, I think it would be, if this, and let's just choose the Christian God, if he exists and wants me to know him and save me, wouldn't he make it easier? Why does he make it so difficult? Why does he seem to hide? And
because you have something to do.
Okay.
You have something important to do. It's no game. The price of life is death. It's not a game, right? There's evil too. You have something to do. It's not easy. In fact, it'll take everything you have. Everything. Right? That's why you're to consecrate everything to God. You're not an infant. But you're not being treated by God like an infant. You're being treated by God like someone
responsible moral agent.
Alright, so Matt pointed out that materialistic determinism isn't atheism, but rather a neutral philosophical position.
But isn't that a philosophical sort of assumption or axiom.
Which is a significant problem for Jordan because he needs to show that atheism entails materialistic determinism. But instead of providing a case for this, Jordan said it is indeed a problem that atheists hold the philosophical position of materialistic determinism.
Well, yeah, that's a problem.
I trust it's quite clear why Jordan's response is lacking. It's almost as if he's not listening. To help Jordan out, Matt then presented what he believes to be one of the best arguments for atheism, namely the problem of divine hiddenness. The problem of divine hiddenness questions why a loving, omnipotent God would remain hidden from sincere seekers. If God exists and desires a relationship with humans, then God's existence should be more evident, no? This issue becomes even more pressing when combined with the threat of punishment for not believing in a specific religion and the mounting evidence against supernatural explanations. And how did Jordan respond? Rather than explaining to Matt why divine hiddenness is as vacuous as all other atheist arguments, he presented one of the defences against the argument.
Because you have something to do.
As is often the case with Jordan, this is a dialectical disaster. You know, maybe I'm being a little bit too hopeful here. But I presume that most religious people watching can see the issue with Jordan's response. Again, I emphasise, it's as if he's not listening. Maybe he's just virtue signalling.
He doesn't just want comfortable little pets in his little habitat,
someone to be made in the image of God is to be someone who wrestles with potential. To genuinely
wrestle with potential.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, that's the tohu vabohu that exists at the beginning of time. Right, the potential, the watery chaos.
Okay.
The Spirit of God sits above the chaos, the primordial chaos, and extracts order out of that. That's what you do as a conscious agent. And you do that. You do that in a way that is aimed towards hell or aimed towards heaven.
But if the way to hell is not affirming, say, Islam, then are you really choosing eternal damnation because you were born in the wrong country and find the arguments for Islam lacking? How is this compatible with a merciful God, Jordan? Don't you get it? Put it this way, Jordan often complains that atheists fail to appreciate the deeper threads of religious beliefs, focusing instead on superficial aspects. However, he falls into the same pattern of being when it comes to atheists. Bucko. Atheists are not merely saying, since God isn't immediately obvious, I don't believe in him. Instead, we emphasize, according to theistic propositions, particularly the requirement to believe under the threat of eternal torment, doesn't it seem very, very odd that God wouldn't make this truth more evident? To follow Matt's example of Christianity, suppose that the Christian God exists and that the only way to receive salvation is through Jesus, as indeed he preached per John 14:6. Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Are we really to believe that a fatherly God who loves us and wants the best for us will reject us if we can't convince ourselves of a book that explicitly endorses slavery, subordinates women, and on a literal reading contradicts our scientific understanding? Really? Does that sound palatable to you? Take the central claim of Jesus' resurrection. The evidence for this supposed miracle, this crucial miracle to Christianity, is abysmal. The best Christians have is Paul, who wrote 25 years after the event, who didn't witness the event himself, but merely tells us that there were 500 eyewitnesses. Come on! Is the tension here not opaque? Jordan speaks about the need to steelman your opponent, to represent their views respectfully, and yet he fails here again to live up to his own standard. It's just disappointing at this rate. Jordan, be better. Clean your fucking room already.
But you wouldn't think people who claim to be atheists are necessarily irrational? Because
they're perfectly rational if you accept the initial axiom, but I don't accept the initial axiom.
What's the original axiom?
Like I said, it's something like a materialist determinism.
Yeah.
No. First of all, whatever matter is, and we certainly don't understand it, it doesn't look at all like something deterministic at the highest level of resolution. Mm-hmm. There's something very weird going on down there at the quantum level, and what the philosophical implications of that are, God only knows. But there's no easy determinism in the physical realm. So anybody who claims that is like stuck in the world of Newton. They're like in 1830.
Right. So the original axiom of atheism is, according to Jordan, something like materialistic determinism. Wow. Just wow. In addition, then, to dismissing all atheist arguments as equally awful, Jordan has strawmanned atheism into something it absolutely isn't.
What if
that.
the person just says, all right, I'm open to believing in God or not believing in God, and I've seen no good evidence or arguments for God's existence?
It's like I said, it's an illegal game move. It has nothing to do with... See, the problem with that argument is that it's an atheist argument right from the beginning.
Ah, I like it. So the next time that a theist presents an argument to me for God's existence, I can say, sorry, bucko, the problem with your argument is that it's a theistic argument. Therefore, it's an illegal chess move. Checkmate. Got it. Good stuff. I'm glad this is seen as intellectual stuff.
Well, what's the evidence? It's like, belief in God is not propositional acceptance of a set of descriptive facts. That's not what it is. It's commitment.
It's both, Jordan, and it's always been both. Put it this way. I can't commit myself to something that I don't believe exists, can I?
So what does it mean to follow in the footsteps of Christ? To believe. It means to hoist your goddamn cross and walk up the hill.
Which would include, you'd think, actually caring enough about your neighbours to represent their concerns accurately. But apparently not. Not for Jordan. That's not a thing.
It doesn't mean that you say, what does Christ say? Not all those who say, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. Well, that's for sure.
Yes, and none will enter who don't believe in the central tenets, will they? We atheists will be cast aside forever, not because we're bad people, and not because we didn't try to embrace Christ, but because we are so made as not to believe. Isn't that a problem? Is that not a good argument for why, something's wrong? It's not consistent with an all-loving, merciful God.
The religious doctrine is not a scientific theory. It's not something you believe like you believe a description of a set of facts. Okay. It's a mode of being. It's a mode of apprehension. It's a mode of perception. It's a mode of action.
No, it's both. Religions like Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism are indeed based on a set of descriptive facts. For instance, Christianity claims that Jesus did, in fact, resurrect from the dead. Islam asserts that Muhammad did, in fact, split the moon. And Hinduism teaches that Krishna did, indeed, lift the Govardhan hill to protect the villagers from a storm. These are factual claims that believers accept as true. Literally true, not some metaphysical truth. Literally true. But religions are also a practice and a way of life. Following Christ involves more than just believing in the resurrection. It's about living according to his teachings of love, compassion, and sacrifice. Similarly, being a devout Muslim isn't just about believing in the miracles of Muhammad, but also about living according to the 5 pillars of Islam. And Hinduism isn't just about accepting the stories of Krishna, but it also involves a commitment to the principles of Dharma and Karma. However, the factual basis of these claims cannot be dismissed, as Jordan does. A person cannot fully commit to the practices and way of life dictated by a religion without first accepting the truth of its foundational claims. It's the belief in those core facts that justifies and motivates the religious commitment. Without this foundational belief, the commitment to the religious way of life lacks the earnest and rational basis. I mean, isn't this obvious? I wonder, does Jordan think that someone can commit themselves to atheism without believing in the existence of religions to dismiss? Or here's one, can someone commit themselves to driving without believing in cars?
I'm pushing back to see if I can understand what you're getting at. Like, in order for me to marry my wife, I need to know she exists, and I need to know she's interested in me, and I need to be able to pursue her, right?
To marry your wife, you need to take a leap of faith.
But I need to know she exists first in order to...
Oh, true.
So that's what I'm saying with God's existence. If God does exist, surely I need some kind of reason to think this isn't just a story I'm telling myself.
Conscience. Where does that pesky little thing come from?
I have to say, great work to Matt pushing back here. I love to see it. Matt emphasised that a prerequisite to committing oneself to something is actually believing that it exists, giving a partner as an example.
In order for me to marry my wife, I need to know she exists.
In response, Jordan brushed this aside by equivocating.
To marry your wife, you need to take a leap of faith.
Most Christians that host Jordan let him get away with this. But Matt didn't. He pressed the point.
So that's what I'm saying with God's existence. If God does exist, surely I need some kind of reason to think this isn't just a story I'm telling myself.
But despite his valiant efforts, Jordan brought up conscience.
Conscience. Where does that pesky little thing come from?
Now, I know that some of you watching like Jordan Peterson, but seriously, what the actual fuck? To illustrate the chaos, let's flip the script. I've just told you that all arguments for God are equally illegal. They're all nonsense. Confused, you've given me one that you find more convincing than the others. Say, the Kalam argument. And I've responded by saying conscience. Where does that little pesky thing come from? As if conscience, as if moral considerations, as if value judgments have anything to do with the factual states of the Kalam, with the descriptive premises. Does this sound like a coherent or respectful mode of being? Of course it isn't. It's dismissive and evasive. It's every bit as weaselly as Jordan often rightfully points out in some of his critics. Jordan's reference to conscience is equally perplexing to the example that I just gave. Instead of addressing the need for evidence or reasons to believe in God, he diverts to a vague concept that doesn't at all engage with Matt's point. Wrapping up, Jordan's approach to the question of atheism is, ironically enough, an illegal move. By reducing atheism to materialistic determinism and dismissing all atheistic arguments as fundamentally flawed, he's not only misrepresented atheism, but also illustrates, once again, that he knows nothing of theology and philosophy. By ignoring the nuances and valid concerns raised by atheists, Jordan misses an opportunity to address the complexities of belief and disbelief genuinely. Sadly, he is every bit as vacuous, dismissive, and indeed pathetic as his worst critics. Anyhow, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to everyone who supports the channel. We really appreciate it. Thanks.